about him. Used to be a high school teacher, now he's at Brown. He's director of science education. He's doing these research programs in the Yucatan and in the Galapagos. And the reason I wanted to bring someone here and try and have an ongoing relationship with the high school is I found that there's people that go out and find interesting, exciting, wonderful things to do. And then there's people that make those things happen. And Dan is someone who created a program himself. And so I'm so excited that we brought him here, and I want to thank the Concord Ed Fund for believing us and supporting us and funding this initiative. And I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and we'll get done from here.
Great, thank you. My name is Dan, call me Dan, and what I'll mention is, okay, I think I want to start out by saying best ideas happen on the back of napkins. Okay, so what had happened was my wife, who went to high school in Greenfield, Mass., the other part of the state, I'm originally from New York, she was invited back to, I don't know, 15th, 20th class reunion, and she asked if I wanted to go. So I said, okay, go, yep, I'll go, and I figured I'm going to be completely bored. I didn't graduate with these students, now they're adults, I don't know any of them, so I'll go. So I went, okay, and sure enough, it was starting out to be pretty boring for me. And then somebody got a microphone, they started asking silly questions. Who has the most children? Who came the furthest? And there was this guy, Bob Jones, raised his hand. Didn't know Bob Jones. And they said he came from Chiapas, Mexico. There's an entomologist. What's an entomologist? Bugs, right. Studying bugs in Chiapas, Mexico. And so I thought, oh, this guy sounds kind of interesting, because I've been doing work in the tropics in Costa Rica, in Panama for probably at that point about 15 years in Belize. So I went over and introduced myself to him, and he started talking about this brand new reserve that was just founded that year in the Yucatan. And he was looking for research teams to come in. Okay, so I didn't have a research team. I was a high school biology teacher, so I volunteered. I said, I'll bring a team. Okay, and we started exchanging names and emails. And I was so excited when I got home. My wife said, what are you going to do about this research team? So I applied for a grant through the National Science Teachers Association, and I got it. It was a $10,000 grant to get equipment to do biodiversity work. Okay, so I was so excited at that point, I actually wrote the Smithsonian, because I knew that they had a biodiversity program, and I said, I want to become trained in biodiversity research. And they called me, and we started talking, and then, when you talk about symbioses, this seemed like it would make a perfect match. They were launching what was called monitoring and assessment of biodiversity. And the only problem with it is it can be very expensive when you bring in trained botanists, trained entomologists, trained mammalogists, all in to study the biodiversity of a region. What I proposed to them was I could give them that free. Okay, and they were saying, how? I said, well, if I train students in those protocols, then, okay, it's a win-win. Students learn these biodiversity survey techniques, they learn about the wildlife, and, okay, for the students, not only do they get that, but they actually get a publication credit, because we put together all the research at the end into a field report, submit it to the Smithsonian, among other ecological agencies. So, that happened as my computer went to sleep. So I'm going to talk and show some pictures. So that was the birth of this, and I called it Habitat Net. So since I started, okay, what I call is a lot of people today talk about hands-on science or minds-on science. I talk about this as being boots-on science, because we're getting people out into the field. Okay, so this is part of the thumb of the Yucatan, and Elidan is one of the ecological reserves in which I've been doing work in. The other one in which I'm taking two of your teachers, Sandra and Sarah, okay, this summer, to, it's just a little further south. It's right about here. Okay, and it's actually a Mayan community. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about that Mayan community. It's literally, you know, people say Maya, they're extinct. That's not true. There's a very thriving, wonderful Mayan community that still exists in Guatemala and portions of the Yucatan. We could talk about this during the question and answer. I met some of the elders in this Nuevo Durango, which is the Mayan village, about 10 years ago. And there's about 200 people that live in this village. Their primary language is Mayan, and their secondary language is Spanish. Okay, so it's really, they really are, maintain the Mayan culture, language, and gardens and foods, okay, and so forth. Really, and medicinal plants as well. We'll talk more about that later on. So, okay, typically, okay, this is our mode of transportation. So, since the 90s, I've taken about 400 high school kids to the Yucatan. And, at first they're really excited because they see plane ticket says Cancun. Okay? And my colleagues, my teaching colleagues, always said, "You're crazy. You're taking high school kids to Cancun?" And I said, "Not to worry." Because what I find is that, it's close, we don't get any closer to Cancun than 10,000 feet above as we approach the airport. So from there, we get in the back of the cattle truck, and we head out to the reserve, okay? And throughout the Yucatan, we live in these Mayan-inspired structures, okay? These are called palapas, okay? These particular palapas at the Eliden Reserve are like tree houses, okay? The ones that your teachers will be in later on, those are some, it's like the story of the Three Little Pigs. They're stick houses. They're made out of sticks. Very comfortable, mosquito netting, and toilets and showers. Okay, so what we begin to do is we look at connections between our New England forests and these forests in Mexico. Okay, we can look at Central America and South America too. What's one connection do you think we have with these forests? I thought the hand went up. I know it didn't, so make a guess. Okay. Yep.
Well, a lot of the warblers that are returning here now were a month ago down there.
Beautiful. Okay, yeah, I loved it. Okay, congratulations on your new school. It's absolutely beautiful. When I arrived around 8 o'clock this morning, as soon as I got out, I started hearing these warblers, and I was thinking, yes, okay, they're back.
Burgers.
Okay, so you can then kind of go into more detail. 2/3 of the bird species we have here in New England are really just here for a couple of months during the summer. Most of the year they're in the tropics. And the really cool thing about these birds is they're very faithful to their sites. So the warblers I heard out by your parking lot out here, they've been coming back generation after generation to that part of the forest. When they leave here in late August or September, they go to some forest in the tropics that also, same spot in that forest year after year. So we've got some real important connections with a lot of wildlife, and also a lot of foods and medicines. Okay, what we're looking at here probably a lot of future drugs, okay, used for medicinal purposes. Okay, it's another thing where 80% of our pharmaceuticals come from tropical plants or animals.
Boston is one of the biggest pharmaceutical manufacturing hubs.
Okay, right. Yep.
Another connection.
Yeah, exactly. So if you look at kind of the pharmaceutical research that's occurring right now, okay, it's usually based in, and we actually, one of the projects that I have my students do is we look for plants that might have some active pharmacological chemicals in it. And the way we look for that is if the leaf shows no predation, that means it's producing some sort of chemical, okay, and that's deterring any predators. And those active chemicals are the ones that are being used as anti-carcinogens, and so forth. So the other thing too is this is related to our blue jay, but it's the Yucatan jay. Yucatan has very unique flora and fauna, the animals and plants. 1/3 of all the plants and animals that we see are only found in the Yucatan. So it's a pretty cool place to actually go and look for wildlife. Okay, what do we have here? Yeah, okay, one of our close relatives, spider monkeys. Okay, and I was mentioning to the biostats class this morning, okay, typically when I have my students out in the forest, we'll get the male, in this case, spider monkey come over, and we're primates. So that male spider monkey wants us out of his turf. Okay, so typically what it'll start doing is it'll start shaking the branches, you go, okay, and what do you think my students do at that point? Yeah, they put down all their measuring tools, they take up their cameras and start taking pictures. Okay, so what do you think the monkey does then, when he sees my students aren't budging?
Throws.
Yeah, he starts throwing stuff, starts breaking up branches and leaves and throwing them at my students, which usually causes my students to laugh, okay? That further infuriates the male. So what do you think he does next? Okay, he takes his camera out and takes pictures of his students. actually, at that point, he usually pees on us. Okay, so I mentioned this to all of you. If you ever go with me to the tropics, after they start throwing leaves and branches, do as I do. Take a step back.
Yeah.
Okay, because you know what's coming up next. Okay. So here, actually, during the summer, we sometimes see moms with babies. Okay, next slide. And they are very endearing, okay, and I know better than this, but we had a spider monkey move in with us one trip. Okay, and it was a he was a real good con artist. Okay, when I was out in the field with my students, he'd sneak back in the cabins and go through all my students' supplies looking for candy bars or fruit that they had. And we came in once and just made a mess out of the cabin, okay, pillaging their food. So typically what we do is we set up these biodiversity plots, and trees don't move. Okay, so we start with trees and we start surveying chunks of the forest in 20 meter by 20 meter quadrants. And Senator Pohl, you may recognize these are some of the early Souhegan kids. Okay, a little bit of trivia. It's interesting. These are three, at the time, there were 3 high school kids. All 3 are now teachers. So then I was also talking about biostats. And is that what we do is we take measurements of the trees. In this case, they use special tapes that actually convert the circumference into diameters, because that's one of the things that we want to get. Okay, and we all sorts of observations. Students then actually devise their own projects. Some want to work with insects, others might want to work with frogs. Okay, we come up with crazy contraptions. This I call BOB, B-O-B, bucket of bugs. Okay, in which we hoisted this to the top of the canopy, and let's see the arrow, you can see it has a light, also a UV light on it, black light. And we left it up there one whole night. Next morning we lowered the bucket to see what sort of beetles and bugs that we collected. What you probably can't see is I'm tracing the edge. This is plexiglass. So what happened is the moths and beetles would fly toward the light, hit the plexiglass, and drop down into the bucket. Okay, so just some students taking their field notes. And the other thing is, for the high school kids, I'll mention this. This is usually January. Look at how they're dressed. It's another good thing about going during the winter. So these guys are actually, their project happened to be looking at butterflies that were there. These guys were out collecting butterflies and decided to dress up using some local mud. Okay, and these gals actually did a comparison. There's a wetland savanna, so they're doing a comparison of butterflies found in the savanna versus butterflies found in the forest. You know, the amazing thing is that so much is unknown about tropical forests that a lot of the times the different bugs you would find are new to science. Okay, and also looking at the dynamics of how they interact with the habitat is new. So that's really one of the interesting things. When we get back, have the students compile their data. Okay, we distill it into a nice little report. Okay, in which we then list their name as a field contributor. Okay, to that project. So the idea is now the Yucatan has been doing this since 1995. So we have now 20 years of continuous data. Okay, so it's 20 years of different high school kids and high school teachers going down and adding to this data set. So each time we're down there, we get a snapshot, we get some really cool data. The idea of biodiversity studies is looking at data and how it changes over time. So we can talk about that. Oh, this is kind of cool. This guy lives in Concord. Well, no, not, it's a her, but I'll explain. Anybody ever hear of E.O. Wilson? Very famous Harvard biologist who retired. His claim to fame is he's like the world expert on ants, and he's also the person who coined the term biodiversity. So this gal right here, she was a junior at the time, really became fascinated with ants. And was collecting ants here, studying them, and 2 years ago she graduated with a PhD in entomology to study ants. I'm convinced she's going to become the next E.O. Wilson. So now I'm not going to talk about this, I mentioned this biostats, because we see some interesting coevolution strategies between ants and host trees, in this case being an acacia. This was another accident discovery, not what these guys are doing, but I I brought down with me like the deer cam. Anybody familiar with those wildlife cameras? Motion detector? Because I started seeing what looked like puma tracks. And then also scat, okay, which is their poop. So these guys, what they're doing is they're making a plaster cast of a puma track. And then I applied for a little grant to get some of those deer cameras and Friskies cat food, okay, that I brought with me. Oops, sorry, herpetological. Okay, more measurements, we'll get back to the cats in a minute. So she's using something that's like a periscope, and which is taking some measurements of how thick the canopy is. So the important part of what's occurring on the forest floor is how much light gets through. So she's using a canopy densitometer. Oh, now back to the wildlife cameras. So I suspected that there were at least puma in the area, and so I brought down cans of Friskies cat food. And areas where we saw their tracks or their poop, their scat, I put some of these cameras. And this was my first cat photo. Anybody know what type of cat this is? Ocelot. Yeah, very good. So that really got me excited. So we started going after others, and sure enough, we wound up getting puma, okay, and jaguars. Okay, so jaguars we found out have, or I found out, scientists knew this for a while, that they have unique spottings on them so that you can tell an individual jaguar from another. So it's like fingerprints. So as of today, okay, I've photographed 24 different jaguars. Okay, they're not all living in the reserve because it's just too many, but they're at least moving through the reserve. Okay, and so far I found all of them like Friskies cat food. Okay. So the other part, I think Senor Polo knows this, is that I started, my interest was researching bats. So I do bring a mist net with me, which is a way you capture bats live. It doesn't hurt them. It's very fine. It's like fine as mist. That's where it gets its name. And bats, even with echolocation, they can't pick it up. They fly into it. It's a soft capture. They're stuck. So then take them out, identify them, and release them. So that's what that looks like. Here, there's a little one. This one's a little nectarivore. It's like a hummingbird, but a bat. Okay, it feeds on nectar and pollen. This one's a frugivore. Okay, they're a little bit bigger. These guys eat fruit. Okay, it's a very common species. There's no picture of the frugivore. Bats are really pretty cool. They're more closely related to us than they are rodents. And I get so upset when I hear people saying, oh, bats, they're flying rodents. That could be more incorrect. Okay, because they're more closely related to primates than they are to rodents. Well, last couple slides, then we'll open up to questions. So this is another endemic, meaning it's only found in the Yucatan. This is called a Morlet's crocodile. These are relatively small. They typically only get about 5 or 6 feet. Okay, but they're common in some of the wetland areas. Okay, so you can see some close-ups, okay, of its jaw. Okay, the way that I get them, I'll let you in my secret, is this one I've actually known since 1995. I've named her Benita. She knows I usually bring hot dogs for her. Okay, so she's coming over to get a little snack. Well, not this, this is one I caught to put a tag on her. Okay, but there, Benita about to eat a hot dog. Okay, and this is, I mentioned to the Biostatistics. This is Benita. She does floss. So I sent this picture to my dentist because I was just so impressed with how white her teeth are. Okay. So what I'm going to do is give me, if I can find this real quickly, I'm going to show you one more picture, actually it's a short video. Then I'll open up the questions. This was, so another place in Mexico that I went once, I had an opportunity to set up a biodiversity plot outside of Mexico City at 12,000 feet on one of the volcanoes. And that's because a lot of the monarch butterflies that we see here during the summer, that's where they overwinter. How many of you know about that? Okay, so I was there in January, and they estimated there were 60 million monarch butterflies overwintering. And at 11 o'clock in the morning, it sounds like an explosion. The sun gets up just high enough, and it warms up the monarchs just enough because they're at high elevation, so they're cold, that they just burst from their pine trees, and they fly down the mountain, get some water, then 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they fly back up again. So it almost looks like a river of monarchs. So this is another protected area. Okay, that's why we set up a biodiversity plot there, so we can begin. We know it's very important to these overwintering monarch butterflies. So we started actually inventorying the trees and making surveys of that. Not different habitat because, it's, as I said, it's up to 12,000 feet.
How sad is that?
It's not. This is actual.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Good question. So I usually don't bring a video camera with me, and I'm so glad I brought just a little video with
Dan.
this. Yeah.
On the spring vacation, I went to Massamoka, and there was an art piece there dedicated to the passenger pigeon.
Oh yeah.
And the extinction, and it looks very much like that. They have it projected on the wall in black and white, coming out of the tree and kind of looping around. And there was just, there was a lot of information and backstory on the extinction of that.
Right. Yeah. It's right at the centennial for that.
Yeah.
So, take a look at that.
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to open up to any questions that you might have at this point. Yes.
Why did you say that the bats were more so
Oh, okay. So if you look at the evolutionary history of where we kind of... Sure. So the question was, why are bats more closely related to us than rodents? Okay, so if you look at the evolutionary tree of life, okay, humans and bats branch off more closely related than rodents, okay? Other things that you can really see. Their teeth match our teeth. Okay, some are specialized. Okay, their social behavior matches ours. Typically, female bats only have 1 or 2 babies a year, and they're one of the few mammal species that will actually care for somebody else's young. So if mom actually gets killed or dies, and she had 2 little pups, okay, another bat usually will adopt those other bat babies. So even their behavior, very, very smart. People say you're blind as a bat. We should all be that blind. Bats actually have really good eyesight. Okay, and of course they have echolocation too to help them navigate at night. So good question. Other questions or comments?
You've been taking these trips?
I actually started in 1985. And I have 80% survival rate. So I think that's pretty good. Yes?
Do you guys work with any scientists or biologists down there that who are located down in Mexico?
Yep. Okay, so, most of the work, so one thing, I could go out in the forest around here, and I'm pretty good with identifying trees. When I go to the tropics, it's like, where do you begin? There are hundreds and hundreds of tree species. So right away, okay, I have a collaborator who's a botanist. So trees, bushes, plants that I can identify. We collect leaf samples, send it off to Juan. Juan gets back to us with work on that. With the Jaguar project, that's now has grown. Okay, so that there are about 4 or 5 biologists. You can look this up online. It's called CN Con, which is it's a UNESCO bioreserve on the coast, which now they've also started some jaguar projects. So it's grown there. A couple of ornithologists, some birders through Chiapas University there in New Mexico that we're constantly sharing data and what we're seeing and updating bird lists. Yep.
So the work you're doing is really inspiring, exciting, and I love that you're bringing so many students down to work with you. And I just had a question about the data collection. So do people ever challenge you and say, these are high school kids collecting data, and is the data then do people not see it as trustworthy? And if so, how do you respond to something like that?
Okay, good question. That hasn't happened. Okay, I'm surprised it hasn't though.
Yeah.
Okay, but one of the reasons I think is because we've been vetted, okay, by the Smithsonian Institution. Okay, so that the protocols, the trainings that I first went through and that I teach the students, those are known protocols. And in our field methods, the field report, at some point you could email me, I could send you a copy of a typical field report. We list what we do know, what we don't know, what the limitations are. Okay, and also the description of the protocols.
Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, given that, we haven't had anybody question that as much. It's, okay, so I don't sequester this, so it's open to whoever wants it.
It's posted online.
It's posted online, okay, in Mexico. There are 2 ecological agencies that have access to it, and the Smithsonian has access to it. Anybody who asks for it, I'd be happy, happily send it along to them. So it's a nice thing. I'm not using the research for my advancement. Okay, so I'm not protecting it. Okay, I just think it's great, and I have a lot of wonderful collaborators. As I said, foreign collaborators with this. So it's fun. Yeah.
Do you have college students in these programs?
Yep. Okay, so each year with the high school groups I take, I try to find funding for one of my college students to go and assist. Okay, once again, it's kind of a win-win. So he or she then actually learns how to do this as well. Okay, and sometimes we've got a big group, 20 high school students. It's great to have another person help, especially when we're in the field. Oh, okay, keep in touch. These methods came up with protocols by the Smithsonian. They are general enough so that they can be used all over the planet. Okay, so that's why when I was teaching in a high school in New Hampshire, we set up the same biodiversity plot right in Amherst, New Hampshire. Okay, doing it. And so you can transfer that to whatever type of habitat you want. Yes?
So Dan, you have now 20 years of data. Have you been able to notice any trends over those 20 years? Anything related to climate change or changes in populations of the species that you've been monitoring?
Yeah. Okay, good question. So more climate change here, the New Hampshire forest data, okay, and seeing when things are leafing out or first blooms and all that, that's really shifted by almost 7 days, almost a full week. Okay, it's gotten earlier. Mexico, okay, we talk about that data. Yeah, I've been looking at disturbance history. So I was mentioning this in the biostats class. I started in the Yucatan in 95. In 2005, Hurricane Wilma came through and decimated the Yucatan. It was much bigger than Katrina, which was very famous in the United States. We didn't pay much attention to Wilma because it really didn't impact us. But Wilma was it still is the largest hurricane on record for planet Earth. And as I mentioned them, it had 150-mile-an-hour sustained winds. Over a 3-day period, 60 inches. That's 5 feet of rain fell. So, okay, it topped all the trees in the forest, okay, in my study plot. And so what's happened since 2005, we've been doing the same studies. We're looking at how the forest regenerates after such a natural disturbance that's taking place. And there's been a lot of interest in that because no one's done that. It was kind of neat that we had started 10 years before this hurricane, and now we've been taking a look at what's happening post-hurricane. So there's interest as far as wildlife changes. In part, I think that's why we've seen an increase in jaguars. Because they, at first, there was a high mortality of all sorts of wildlife because of the hurricane, and these animals were scrambling, okay? One of them was radio collared. And as of 2 weeks ago, guess where we found this jaguar? In the suburbs of Cancun. Okay, it's not picking off people, it's picking off people's cats and dogs. Okay, so, when food is a pressure, they'll start encroaching on some of our areas as well. So, but that's the real cool thing, is looking at these changes over time. Oh, yeah, okay. Yep. Another question?
Yeah.
Oh, Leo, sorry.
Sorry, way over here. As a way of connecting your schools here in the north and your work in Mexico, have you been involved in any migratory? You were actually just talking about monarch flight before we came down here. I know there are tracking programs that track monarchs from their northern summer grounds down to Mexico. Have you been involved
Okay, we've been involved with that in terms of it's their program and all that, but we voluntarily, late August, collect the emerging monarchs, the tags on them, release them, and then that's what happens. Monarch Watch then sends biologists to the Central Highlands of Mexico looking for the color-coded tags that are on there. So because realistically the tags are like this big, with binoculars you're not going to read the numbers, but you can see the color. So New England butterflies might have green on them. You know, Central Plains might be blue. So this way you can see roughly where those animals came from, those butterflies. Yes?
So do you only recruit kids that are from your high school, or is it from surrounding areas?
So, yep, now, so since I'm not working at the high school anymore, it's really open. So it has been mostly teachers that have gone to my workshops or interested. Last 3 years, I've had a school group, in a public charter school in New York City that have gone in January. So I've had a school from Louisiana. There'll be another school in Connecticut that's interested. So it really just depends on, you know, it doesn't have to be from a certain school. Yep.
Question about the bat population.
Yeah.
Because I read a lot of reports, not a lot, about how certain ones are endangered and diseases. And so what have you seen through the years in terms of the bat population? And also, do bats migrate? Speaking of migration, I
Yeah,
don't
good
know.
question. Most do migrate. Okay, the ones in the tropics don't. Okay, but ours, we have, technically we've got 8 species in Massachusetts. 4 are more common than the other 4. Most of them migrate. They migrate mostly to caves, so like in the Midwest, Ohio, and so forth, and overwinter in those caves. And New York State, there are caves upstate New York. So what started becoming known about 6 years ago was that some of the bats were dying during the winter, white nose fungi. Okay, and unfortunately it was probably brought to the United States by bat ecologists. Because the fungus originated in Europe, and was probably transferred on the boots of these bat ecologists who went to different hibernacular with bats. It's decimated the little brown bat population, which should be plentiful here. But I think the last couple of summers, I've gone out, and last summer I think I saw 2. That's it. And usually each night I'd go out during the summer, and I'd see dozens of them, you know, just feeding on mosquitoes. So it really has an impact. There's been a moratorium by bat ecologists from not entering the hibernacular bats. You can look this up online. I just saw this the other day. There's a bat ecologist at Brown University who just published online, and it's on the webpage at Brown. They think they now understand the mechanism behind this, so therefore there's a potential treatment for these bats. So that's kind of exciting, okay, if that is true. So I know there's another hand. Yep.
Yeah, so collect a lot of data, and it's a lot of work to do that. If people are asking you, what are the most significant outcomes that have come out of this years of collecting data from that? You've got all this information out there. What have people done with it? What impact does that have?
Okay, so more than the data, I think the impact on individuals' lives. Okay, to me, it's the most, I mean, there are 2 research components that I've been doing on this. One has been biodiversity data, and the other was on the educational outcome of having in-field, true-field experiences for kids and scientific literacy. So to me, that's the most important, looking at the literacy skills we're building kids, of knowing how to collect data, treat data, knowing to say that's not enough data. Okay, that's all part of being literate. Not just having that aha moment, but understanding that. I think from a scientific standpoint, I think just having 20 years of continuous data on a tropical forest is very rare. Okay, so so here I was mostly a high school teacher now Brown. There are a number of people that want to have access to the data, and I get requests from entomologists, botanists, or wanting to collaborate. I just don't have the time to collaborate with all these projects because HabitatNet is part of what I do, but it's mostly the educational piece that I'm interested in. Yep.
And I think in the biostatistics class, we're going to be looking at big data sets as one of the things that we do and say,
and someone says, you shouldn't do that, why? You know, there's no data that says of any impacts, you know, one way or the other. And, you know, having a repository of information like you have potentially allows for questions that come up to be answered.
Right.
You know, and so part of it is whether some of what you do is, you know, you prepare for that, but it also could have other times.
It could have, okay, but the nice thing is, I'm in a position where I don't have to publish with Paris, so I don't care. This is what I'm doing because I love to do it. You know, as I mentioned, the biostats class, my mom always teases my wife, is like, when is he meeting me? I'm 60 years old, going to outgrow the need to go out and catch frogs. Okay, I don't think that's going to happen. Okay, so for me, I mean, part of it is just the joy of going out and collecting the data. I mean, one thing that we started seeing after the first hectare of forest data, and we looked at what are the dominant tree species, okay, we're seeing this connection to Mayan culture that has selected certain tree species over the years. The two most dominant tree species were used by Mayans. It's probably not a coincidence that they're the dominant trees that we find in our Yucatan forests.